All right, we are at the top of the hour and welcome everybody to our Project Learning Tree Canada employer training, setting youth up for success. If you welcome, employ, and supervise young folks working in the great outdoors in a green job in forestry and conservation, or if you're curious about this work, you're in the right place. So we welcome you to this session that will go on for about 45 minutes, followed by questions. And we'll just dive right in. So thank you for being with us today. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Jojagi, Montreal, which is the ancestral territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. And as part of the PLT Canada and SFI team, we want to acknowledge that our diverse team of staff and consultants live and work on the ancestral territories of many Indigenous nations, including from our offices on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people, which is now Ottawa, and the Nahashkatank and Piscataway peoples present in Washington, D.C. We're committed to building forest-focused collaborations that recognize and respect Indigenous peoples' rights, traditional knowledge, relationships with the land, enduring leadership in forest stewardship, and responsibilities to future generations. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. You are welcome to have your camera on or off. We ask that you use the mute function throughout the presentation and right-click on your name to add your organization, your school or organization where you work. And you're most welcome throughout the presentation to use the chat. I will likely be getting to those answers at the end during our Q&A period. I'd also like to introduce myself and introduce the day or the session that we're going to share in our time together. My name is Meg Hanna. I'm Director of Urban and Community Forestry for Canada at the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, and I support Project Learning Tree's Career Pathways program. I myself have entered the forest sector on a non-linear path through a green job, working as a summer student in landscaping, and then bridged into public horticulture and urban forestry. Through my career, I've touched different functions in the management of municipal green spaces, including being a crew lead on a summer landscaping crew in my earlier life, and serving as a supervisor for a large municipality in Quebec. It's those insights and the learning approaches and community-based work that we do here at PLT Canada and SFI that will inform our session. And what you can expect in our time together is to learn a little bit more about SFI and PLT Canada if you don't know us, and discuss Green Jobs youth perspectives and needs, what we've learned through guiding Green Jobs programs and contributing since 2018. And how we connect those perspectives and needs to practical strategies for fostering success as we welcome folks in our organization and hopefully guide and coach them through enriching careers in the green job sector. I'll share a few tools and resources at the end, and then we'll dive into question period through the chat. So keep the questions coming as we go, and I'll be happy to address them at the end of the presentation. Our learning objectives are centered on recognizing the needs of new and diverse employees starting work in an organization, some for the first time. Also recognizing how to respond to employee needs with the best onboarding practices possible with the information that we have, to identify measures to make workplaces welcoming and safe for new employees, but the ripple effect of being safe for all, and to develop actions to foster employee belonging engagement. So we'll focus on setting the scene, who we are, why we do what we do, and why this work matters. And then we'll delve right into those practical solutions that you can implement or improve on in the organizations where you work and where you grow. At Sustainable Forestry Initiative, we envision a world that values and benefits from sustainably managed forests. That vision comes to life through our mission to advance sustainability through forest-focused collaboration. And we do this across rigorous forestry standards, impactful conservation work on the SFI footprint, bridging communities together through our community team, and fostering a lifetime of learning through Project Learning Tree Canada, which is an initiative of SFI. We advance education, forest literacy, and career pathways using trees as windows on the world. Well, we have many educational resources on our website, and I will share a few at the end of this presentation. Our focus of this discussion will be on our career pathways work. I'd also like to present the diverse and multifaceted, multidisciplinary team working across Canada. We have specialists in organizational management, professional forestry and communications, but also in community-based work, in engaging Indigenous communities, educating folks across all ages in the lifetime of learning, from very young folks to people experiencing their career for the first time and beyond. And some of you, as part of the Green Jobs program, may have interacted already with our team, and it's our intention and our hope that that interaction has been very positive, and we thank you for collaborating with us. For folks joining us for the first time, this initiative is part of our PLT Canada Green Jobs program, and this is supported through funding diverse levels of government, from the federal government with Parks Canada to the Natural Resources Canada, as well as the Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development with the province of Ontario. We run an array of programs that connect young folks 15 to 30 years of age to meaningful career opportunities in the outdoors. To the employers of that program who are joining us, you represent one of the 470 plus employers that connect youth to opportunities. Since 2018, we've placed over 8,700 young folks in green jobs, consistently over 50% women, with 55% of those green jobs being filled by young women this year. And in 2025, we've also been able to place 24% of our participants, Indigenous folks, representing communities from coast to coast to coast. And that number is growing with every connection that we make. And it's with that team, that work, and that mission that drive us to our topic today. What do youth need to thrive in green jobs? If you have some ideas about that, this is a great opportunity to pop that in the chat. If you think that youth can benefit from different strategies, if there's something that your organization is doing to advance the success of young people in green careers, please share with us. We'd love to hear that, and that can help shape the content of future presentations. And with that, I'd also like to invite you to self-reflect before we dive into some very rich content over the next couple of slides. I'd like you to think about your first experience, and that can be your first job or your first green career or even your first role where you're at now. I'm interested to hear, and please share, read in the chat. Is there something that you wish someone had told you or had shown you to help you get started in your role? I, for one, would have really liked to know how to use certain equipment and have a really thorough demonstration without having to muddle through it myself in a very awkward way. And you may have also have some experiences like that. So don't be shy. Again, your comments will help shape our content. And if you'd prefer to hold that thought to yourself, I would really like you to think about what you wish someone had told you or shown you to help you get started. And we'll keep that intention in mind as we dive in. And I do thank Sky at Lower North Thompson Community Forest, I guess, for sharing that, they wish they learned more about professional designations, like hidden masters. So, the difference that getting a professional designation like a registered professional forester or an agronomist or, maybe even a certified accountant or human resources professional, the difference that can make in your career pathway and how you can get to that sooner. Thank you, Sky, for sharing. So today's presentation is about leaning into the unknown, figuring out what you would have liked to have known and figuring out what other folks want to know. And we do that by asking. When you don't know, ask. And I'm going to be gently guiding that concept throughout the slides in this presentation. Let's set the scene. Who are the green jobs that we welcome in our organization? Where are they coming from? How old are they? What language do they speak? Where did they receive their training? How close or far do they live from the work site? Are they joining their job with other folks that they know already on the job or in the same cohort? Or are they experiencing a new organization all by themselves for the first time? And what is the perspective that they bring to this work? This is a great time to share that throughout our history of accompanying over 8,700 youth, 41% of those folks, 40% of the people that we reach have faced barriers in green jobs. And we've been able to support that work through these partnerships. And we mean folks that can come from Indigenous communities, visible minorities or racialized communities, Canadians living with a visible or invisible disability, folks in the LGBTQIA plus community, and even new Canadians. So their experience is going to be very different from one area and one job to the next. And we always keep this in mind, and we'll invite you to reflect as we go through some of the strategies of how we can bring in wraparound supports as these folks enter the workforce or enter a new job and help them thrive and grow. We've also surveyed over 1,100 youth, and part of that feedback has influenced how we recognize and identify the barriers that we don't always see on a CV, in an interview, or in those first days on the job, or maybe even throughout their whole career. Our youth have, the youth that we've reached in this program have shared with us, three large buckets where we're seeing difficulties that sometimes go unnoticed or can explain maybe other difficulties that folks are experiencing on the job. And these can be summarized by issues with or concerns with financial stability, gaining experience and growing confidence on the job, and issues with access to work and ability to do tasks under the lens of inclusion. So with financial stability, youth have shared with us that in the communities where they live, sometimes there's lacking stable job opportunities, opportunities where there's professional growth, opportunities with a living wage or beyond seasonal or punctual employment, and the general cost of equipment to entering the sector, especially in those jobs where equipment is not provided by the employer. With experience and confidence, there's the exposure to education in the communities where folks live and work, having access to that on-the-job experience that can obviously open up new opportunities beyond entry-level roles, or even sometimes the experience that's a barrier to even accessing entry-level roles. The time and the coaching and mentorship that it takes to develop existing technical skills or grow new ones, and absence of role models and mentors to help show that what you can see, you can dream, and what you can dream, you can be throughout your career. And just the different types of accommodations that we need to be aware of and make space for to enable our teams to thrive, whether it's accommodating work schedules for family responsibilities, caring for young children and dependents or elders, transit options, how we're getting to work and staying at work, maybe some language barriers, as the language of work may be the second or even third language of the folks joining us, and accommodating different disabilities, whether it's through ergonomic workstation modifications that we can consider, maybe adapting the equipment in the workplace, providing software or assisted software for language or low vision or low hearing. And accommodating work schedules to account for things like, space for religious and cultural practices like smudging and prayer, or time off to account for cultural ceremony or even sustenance hunting, as these are likely the realities in some of the places where you're working. So that just represents some of the barriers. And how do we respond? It really comes with developing a workplace where everybody feels visible, heard, and valued. The aspect of being seen, which is inherently, I think, what every human wants when they express themselves, to be acknowledged for what they have to say and contribute. And these are really workplaces where team members are respected as human beings, and just beyond folks that are fulfilling a duty or a task, but that they're really an essential element, and that their personal and psychological safety is also to be respected and cared for. That folks are consulted, so that they're asked their opinion and given the opportunity to speak and not interrupted, that opportunity to finish their thought and make a meaningful contribution. This is a place where team members feel connected rather than isolated or ostracized, but integrated into teams, having the opportunity to meet new people and having the opportunity to be able to grow and build trust in those professional relationships. And places where folks are recognized for the work that they do. So if they have an idea, that idea is, acknowledged that they brought that to the table, or if somebody, a person or team has performed good work, that they are recognized and celebrated for that work, whether it's one-on-one feedback and a discreet congratulations, or a shout out to the team, or a call out in, official correspondence. I think this is a good opportunity here when we talk about recognition is to ask folks, how do you like to be recognized? How does that motivate you and inspire you? Rather than maybe single you out or embarrass you. So just a couple of things to take into consideration when creating that environment and cultivating that visibility that we want to foster all throughout our approach. And really, we go back to that reflection that I invited at the beginning is if you don't know, ask. Asking and getting information and understanding is really that pathway to success. When we understand one another, then we can take a more active role in supporting one another and working together and finding consensus. So how do we understand? That can come with just the simple question, can you help me understand? And approaching that with a lens of curiosity and being open to difference, even though sometimes that can feel a little awkward or uncomfortable. Curiosity and understanding enable support. And you don't have to guess what somebody is thinking or feeling or going through. You can ask, obviously, with respect. And this is something that, we might want to do in a one-on-one personal meeting that we'll talk about a little bit later. But another thing I want you to invite to think about in this approach of visibility and understanding is trying those open-ended questions when we engage with folks. So yes, sometimes the yes or no question is, needed to get information. Are you coming into work today? Are you okay? Absolutely. But when we want to go a little bit deeper, what are some of those examples of open-ended questions that we can invite folks to share? Questions like, what are you most curious to learn about in this role? A great onboarding question to help align some of those skills and missions with the interests of the people that we welcome and try to sparse that, intersperse that in with all of the duties and tasks and responsibilities that we need to get to. How do you learn best on the job? And this question is worth its weight in gold. It's really following that platinum rule of treating others as they'd like to be treated and creating space as the situation allows to accommodate different working or learning styles, whether somebody is a more visual learner and they need to see a diagram or instructions. If somebody is more learn by doing, observing somebody perform a task and then, taking a crack at it and getting that feedback. Or if it's somebody that needs to sit with some written instructions and come back to it. So really understanding with curiosity how folks learn can help us be better trainers and better coaches on the job. And lastly, a question that's near and dear to my heart that I've learned through a colleague here who shared with me, what does support look like? And, really understanding what that support looks like and then putting those pieces together of how I, as a supervisor, what does support look like for you and how can I help? So that's just a little bit of context setting to the barriers that we encounter, that youth are experiencing and feeling, something very mindful to be aware of, some of the I guess the demeanor or the way that we can craft our approach with that curiosity, the mindset and visibility. And now I'd really like to bring it over for the rest of the presentation to practical, workable strategies for success. And I'm somebody who very much likes to break things down into small digestible chunks. We'll talk about that throughout the remainder of the presentation as well. But I like to piece it out into kind of these 4 steps that are kind of occurring throughout. Obviously, at the beginning, before folks arrive, is preparing to welcome new employees, preparing with intentionality. What does that process look like? What do we include? And who do we include? And throughout the process of welcoming and supervising and coaching and working with everybody in our organizations to communicate clearly. For that supervision, coaching, mentorship, or even frequent collaboration with partners, the importance of connecting early and regularly and setting that frequency of meetings for those one-on-ones, and how we can support consistently and reliably through the growth of young people in an organization. I also like to break things down into the 5 Ws. If you've seen me in my standards work, it's really the approach that I've crafted over time, and I'd like to try it over here in the training side of things. So if we're crafting an onboarding plan, that can look like a one-pager checklist. We'll look at, providing an example for you after this presentation. So we can have a written plan, but it's also good, again, to have this mindset and intention as we prepare. So breaking down those 5 Ws, when we're welcoming folks to our organization, really diving into the why youth are here to contribute in our workplaces. What is their role and how does that role relate to the mission? Essentially, why does this work matter? And in this context, no task is too small, and it is important to show how every contribution of youth relates to the wider whole and that bigger picture. Who are you welcoming to your workplace? This is something that we can relate to the perspectives, needs, and barriers that we just addressed, but really diving into finding out with curiosity, who are the folks that we welcome to our organizations? When will folks contribute? And this really speaks to setting a clear start date to employment and being clear about work scheduling as well. Where will the work take place? Will it take place in one or multiple locations, and how is that managed? And what youth will be doing on the job. So with regards to the onboarding plan, when we delivered similar training last year, 31% of employees who attended our sessions either did not have a standardized onboarding plan in their organization, or they simply didn't know. So carving out these 5 Ws is a really good way to start if we are developing something for the first time, or if we're refining an existing onboarding plan. 41% also shared that their onboarding plan wasn't up to date. So again, looking at things with a new lens and structuring it, piecing it out, could be another way to add value to your program. So where do we start in these basic components? And any of the work that I do, I like to start with the why. And some examples of the why could be going back to your job description. Obviously, if you've already hired folks, this should be taken care of, but still making sure that that job description is up to date and that it's very clear about what the contribution of the youth will be. And the most important part is how that job description relates to the mission and the values of the organization. At SFI, we have something called a staff culture document. And this iterates who we are as a team, what our mission and vision are, what I just shared with you at the beginning, and what are some of those values behind who we are as a creative, strategic, collaborative, supportive, and fun team here on the job. So if you don't have a culture document, or you maybe have a mission and values, this would be a good opportunity to pull that out, as you can start that conversation with youth as they enter the workplace. Why are they here? And how is what they're doing contributes to the bigger picture of what your organization sets out to achieve. The why matters. Now the who, understanding who we're welcoming to our organizations. The value here is by reaching out early. So some of you who are human resources folks, you might be meeting folks pretty early on in those telephone and in-person job interviews. For the supervisors, you may meet these folks a little bit later. But there is a lot of value to connecting early and learning as much as we can about the folks that we welcome. So how many new folks are we welcoming? This is a good question to ask, because if we're welcoming one person or several at the same time, there may be either an opportunity for really focused engagement with, tailored one-on-ones, which add value to any professional relationship. And if we have multiple folks, maybe we can bring them in as a cohort so that we are saving a bit of time. But as a cohort, these folks have an opportunity to get into something together and build their own personal support network between them and have that bonding of going through a similar experience. So something to think about. Preferred communication style, incredibly important in 2025. We have folks that prefer text, email, WhatsApp, folks that, need to be verbally reminded, some folks that things need to be written down. So really dialing down and figuring out what that communication style is, and also how we can reinforce what we need to share, especially when it's very important, using multiple modes of communication. Um, and then looking at those accommodations that are needed, we talked about workplace accessibility. Is there public transit, for example? Does your workplace offer any public transit discounts to students coming in using the bus or the train or service like that? Is there parking? If so, informing in advance how folks need to get there, if they need a parking pass, and how we can, or if there's accessible parking and ramps and ways to get onto the job easy. Flexible work arrangements or vacation time, unpaid, authorized, or paid time off to accommodate those things I mentioned earlier, the important facets of people's lives, if they're caring for family members, if they're engaging in ceremony or cultural and religious practices, making space for that and figuring out how your organization makes space, for those practices and any, other support that can be offered. So really, understanding that from those early conversations. The welcome kit. I've worked for a city, so this can be quite exhaustive. And we've often asked the question, does everything need to be shared in advance? And I like to break it down into what matters the most, especially when we're making that first phone call and that follow-up welcome email. What do you need to know? What do you need to bring? What do you need to fill out? And so that what you need to know, obviously the essentials of schedule, location, where to meet, when to meet, who to ask for help, and some quick coordinates to reach somebody. For example, if someone's having difficulty reaching work on their first day, finding those supports in place to alleviate that anxiety and know who they can turn to if the unexpected occurs. And, sometimes it's also good to get a general sense of tasks on day one. Not always necessary, but for example, if somebody is coming to work and their ID card, they're going to get their photo taken on their first day. Folks appreciate knowing that in advance, catches them left off guard. So just, what to expect on that first day of work. What to bring, appropriate wardrobe. This is key, especially on that first day, if we're working outside, if we're working indoors, if we're, meeting very important people, what's going to be that wardrobe that's going to ensure safety, comfort, and success and professionalism. The equipment to bring. So some things may be the responsibility of the employee, like footwear, sunscreen, insect repellent, maybe any personal tools or equipment specific to their line of work if they're in a specific trade. And, being very clear about that equipment that is provided. Are there tools, support, provided on the job, or personal protective equipment or PPE? What to do with meals, if folks are bringing their meals in, where can they keep that? Or if there are places where folks can, get food on the job, and what those transportation options are. What to fill out. This is important if, certain things need to be filled out in advance so employees can get paid on time. So iterating how that is important. Also valuable to have those emergency contacts as early as possible, especially if you folks are out working in areas that are less accessible or if there are more inherent risks to the job. Knowing as soon as those folks show up, who we can call in the event of an emergency. Any allergies or health consideration, always good to know as well, within the realm of obviously what can be asked in your HR policies. This maybe can be something that's discussed on a one-on-one. Again, just offering if that disclosure, that support is needed as the employee sees fit, and any relevant policy forms, and that can likely be filled out throughout their first days on the job. The importance of communicating clearly. So getting into the how employees will receive information. We touched on this in a slide earlier, but really figuring out, when communication will be verbal, if it'll be like close contact with the supervisor or colleagues on a regular basis, or if there are daily stand-up meetings at the beginning of the shift to set objectives or guidelines and information for the day. If there is a written component through any internal messaging system or emails or bulletins, if there is the expectation that they bring their cell phone or that they're provided with a device to receive digital communications like texts and e-notifications, if the communication may be more physical with demonstrations on the job and one-on-one check-ins, and being clear about how often these types of things will happen. So with regards to communication, as we prepare for those first days on the job, the importance of connecting first. A thoughtful first contact builds trust, especially between the direct supervisor and the employee reporting into that supervisor. So if there is an opportunity to call folks prior to them getting on the job, it is a good opportunity to take, even if it's a voicemail, a phone call to offer that space to address questions. You can start to look at maybe what some of those goals are and concerns, and really set the scene for day one when that employee arrives. It may also be useful after a discussion to say, I'm going to send you a follow-up email. It may include the what to bring, what to know, what to fill out, as that's relevant, or that might be something that the supervisor completes in partnership with their human resources professional. Letting folks know what information to expect and when, it always takes some of the edge and the anxiety out of starting a new job. Although one thing we need to be aware of as well is if we're sending a follow-up email or there's a phone call, there's a lot of nerves in a first job, so maybe not everything's going to be retained for day one, but it's a good opportunity to start to get that information out there and reinforce in those early meetings and scheduling those regular check-ins once the job begins. This speaks to one of the references that I will, actually two of the references that I'll share on the slides, just some of the books out there in organizational psychology, how we can be at work, how we can foster that authentic communication. And I really like these concepts of being enablers and connectors. So enabling, really fostering that learning and growth, setting folks up with what they need and being very deliberate about that, explaining those expectations clearly and providing examples of what you mean when you expect something. Giving space for the employee themselves to develop their own goals in partnership with their supervisor based on what those team priorities are. And also really enabling growth by recognizing effort and progress. So that one-on-one feedback, those celebratory remarks, or the team call out, if folks are comfortable with that, definitely those opportunities to enable and empower over the long term. And being connectors. So this comes from Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point. I really love this concept of being a connector, somebody who connects people to other people or connect people to purpose and opportunities. These can be the champions and mentors that you introduce young people to within your organization, and they support camaraderie and belonging and really bring folks in along for the ride. These may be supervisors themselves or other folks in the organization that can show career opportunities and that upward growth within the organization, or outside the walls as well within the profession, maybe talking about things like going and getting continuing education or pursuing a professional designation like RPF, and linking tasks to the greater mission and the meaning of what we do. So as we get started, supporting consistently, what do those supports look like? And I think a big part of it comes from a structured onboarding process. Onboarding in action can happen in 3 phases. There's all that preparation with intentionality that we talked about before new employees arrive. There's what happens on day one and what's the script behind that. And those first weeks or that probationary period. And that's going to look different from one organization to the next. One employer may only have 14 weeks with the staff that they're welcoming. Others, it may be a more longer term, and there could be maybe a 30 or 90-day probationary period. So it's really up to you to set what that progression into the organization looks like. At this stage for onboarding, it's important to define who will take part and be an active participant in the staff onboarding and really plot the course of what to expect. So this goes a little further than what I shared in the earlier slides. Sometimes it can be a simple one-pager. This is just adapted from an organization that I used to work at, where we'd carve out the time and there'd be a mix between the supervisor, the crew lead, and those champions of how are things going to go, how do folks need to dress, when are we going to go on break, who are they going to meet, and maybe what training they'll receive. Sometimes in those early days, we're already diving into WMIS training and workplace hazardous materials and information and all that good stuff. So that's just an example of how we can onboard, we can prepare a one-pager or a script. What does that first day look like? It looks like a warm welcome from the supervisor, a simple tour and introductions with key people, always, helping somebody feel included and belonging, a clear first day of either tasks or steps that they need to complete, access to any essential tools or PPE, really getting started. This isn't always possible, but if you can have the workstation configured for when the employees get there, having a desk or a place to work, a login, or, that seat in the truck that's ready to go, really goes the extra mile in making somebody feel like they're expected rather than an afterthought. And again, this is only within the realm of possibility as organizations navigate many challenges. Being paired up with a buddy or a champion in the organization for breaks, meals, someone they can turn to for questions and not have to escalate everything to the supervisor may also help diffuse that stress of a first day on the job. And this is something that I experience in my present organization and the organization I was with before. But, having one of the leaders send a welcome notice to current staff, sometimes that can include the person's photo, if they're comfortable with that, but just informing them that this person is joining the team and this is where they'll be working. So kind of preparing the terrain in advance. I'd like to talk about the first conversation, and that usually happens on the first day as well. Really setting the tone with clarity and care for the folks that we're welcoming into organizations. And this is really about, what we're going to share, what we're going to ask, what we're going to go over with the employee, and what we're going to include. It's important to acknowledge the value of a new employee on the team. And not just as a checkbox item, but really understanding why they're there, that connection to the mission, and giving them that opportunity to be excited about the work that they're doing. Defining what success will look like in week one. This can maybe be an overview of the training they'll receive, the places that they'll go, the people that they'll meet, or some of those key tasks that they may begin completing. Explain where to go for help and how to escalate things. There may be a pretty, defined chain of command where you work, or it might be one person fulfilling all of those roles, and just making sure that that's very clear will be helpful. Describing safety expectations outright. In the work that we do outside in the green sector, there are a lot of inherent risks that come with working outside or working with wildlife or machinery, or even, the risk we can encounter when working with the public. Is just making sure folks are aware of those safety expectations, and those are reinforced as well. And this is that time where we can ask those open-ended questions that I mentioned. So what's important to you in this experience? What do you care about? What does support look like for you? And how can I help? So those early expectations, this is the laundry list of items. And as I said, you'll have access to this presentation. So this may be a good refresher or checklist for you, but really going through all of those policies, standard operating procedures, any of the nitty gritty that is necessary in those first days, make that as clear as possible, be as welcoming as questions, and reinforce that by including any written copies of key reference docs that people need to have. And in some organizations, these may also need to be reviewed and signed by employees. So, getting that established early in Also figuring out when is a good time as to not overwhelm people. Maybe some of this happens over the first 2 or 3 days rather than the first morning. And, covering things like code of conduct, any basics on attendance requirements and who to call if you can't make it to work. Any of the policies in place, anti-harassment and discrimination, using tobacco, social media, or cell phones on the job, or maybe even what effective conflict resolution strategies look like. These are some examples that have been taken from employer surveys and some of the supports or structure that they've informed us that they have in their organization. So growing confidence from day one, and this is really about that consistent support, spreading out learning into digestible chunks. So maybe not everything needs to be completed on the first day, or there can be a script to sort of piece things out and let folks know what to expect as they go into it. The daily check-ins are important from somebody in a supervisor or team leader standpoint. Even that 5-minute touch point of just coming in, asking how you're feeling, what are you working on, what are you interested in today, what are you concerned about, can go a long way. And sometimes those first interactions can be a little on the longer side, but as you develop that trust and that, being there frequently and consistently, those conversations sometimes become a bit shorter, and folks really start to understand that preferred communication style. Scheduling consistent one-on-ones, having a predictable time and a meeting agenda that we can set in advance is also a way for a supervisor to develop a more trusting, complete and transparent relationship with someone reporting directly into them. So it's about, anticipating that there'll be a conversation. It's not always going to be a hard or bad feedback, but really setting that in motion so you can revisit those early wins and celebrate anything that's going really well. Assigning achievable action items to scale somebody's learning. This cultivates their agency as they grow in the organization. And it's an opportunity to set shared goals together. So that two-way communication between the supervisor of this is what our team priorities are, this is what our organizational goals are, and how does the employee have a direct role in shaping their progress within that. I added that the one-on-one meeting, so a periodic check-in, maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, is really time that is well invested. It can happen in an office, but it can happen on the job as well, and really setting aside that time to discuss things like career aspirations and professional goals, how to communicate with one another and rely on one another and build that trust, learning how employees work best, or how to tend to maybe a potential issue before it escalates into something bigger, providing that opportunity to guide or redirect. Identifying any accommodations that need to be considered early on in their employment and making sure that folks don't feel like a burden if they do have these accommodations that they need, and giving that clear and constructive feedback. So the one-on-one, I've been doing them for 8 years, and it really is time well worth it. Well worth it. So the effective feedback that we can supply in a one-on-one or that we can provide as something happens on the job. This is verbal feedback that guides growth for anyone in an organization, new or well into their career. Good feedback is, information that is timely, shared 24 to 48 hours if something good or, something bad has happened, something we want to reinforce and support, or something that we want to correct and tend to. Specific. So try to stay away from the adjectives, not like you're like this or you always do this and the value judgment, but really focusing on specific facts rather than an interpretation or a value judgment. Yesterday, this happened, and really explaining the impact of what happened, whether it's a positive consequence for the team and the organization that we would like to celebrate, or if it's something that requires action in a different way. So what is the impact or consequence on the team, and what are we asking of the person? Is it something that a behavior or an act that we want them to continue, to improve, to stop, or to start? And this should be a two-way process. So giving space for the employee to react and recommend actions or revisiting cooler heads prevail. And following up after the feedback is very important and brings that consistent support in as well. This is an opportunity to identify who your champions are in the organization. These are your keen folks, your social, your welcoming and positive folks, colleagues that help new employees feel confident and connected in their role. Now, these are people that can support learning and growth and sometimes foster inclusion and belonging, or sometimes both. On the purple side, we have our educators, our trainers, our mentors, our stewards. On the orange side, we have our social butterflies, the folks that are organizing holiday parties and, calling out success and introducing people to one another. So these champions are good folks to pair new employees in different situations. These might be people that are able to offer job shadowing or on-the-job demonstrations, act as mentors or role models, and address those little micro questions that might not merit going up to the supervisor, or something that the employee hesitates escalating, and has that first person that they can check in with and provide that guidance. They make folks feel welcome. The good ones model the mission, the value, they show the norms within your organization and contribute to the overall social success. So, a welcoming workplace. For youth, it provides clear expectations, reliable support. It provides the space and the safety to learn, to make mistakes, and to grow with confidence. So having those folks around, whether they're peers, folks within their same cohort, team leaders, supervisors, those folks that are going to make people feel like they're in the right place in the right moment, and they can only grow from there. And on the employer side, when we take the extra time to prepare with intentionality, to support growth consistently, to communicate clearly, this provides a place where we have respect and dignity for all on all sides of the table, safer work overall, a more alert and conscientious team, a stronger staff culture that is supportive and collaborative, better communication, which ultimately leads to better performance, more engaged teams, and overall contributes to higher retention. So to wrap things up, what did we talk about today? We talked about connecting Green Jobs youth early and often, so connecting and preparing for their arrival with intention, letting youth know what to expect on the job and as they go through. We talked about adopting a posture of curiosity and understanding perspectives very openly and respectfully, making time for those regular check-ins and space for the one-on-ones, providing feedback that is timely, specific, impact-centered, and with that request, again, very specific. And recognizing contributions and celebrating the success of folks that are bringing value to our organization. And that's everyone. And offering insight and resources on career development can be another thing that you offer. And that's something that we can help with. So a couple of tools and resources from PLT Canada, if you don't know. We do have career and role model highlights. This is a Canadian example with the voices of Indigenous professionals, a guide to green jobs in Canada, profiling the contributions of 12 Indigenous forest and conservation leaders within their community. It shows their career pathway, why they got into the work that they're doing, and why it matters to them. And this is available freely on our website. On the American side, but just as relevant north of the border, is Black Faces in Green Spaces, the journey of Black professionals in green careers, which highlights the contributions of Black Americans in forestry and conservation, from students to entrepreneurs to researchers to CEOs. Really, again, reinforcing that if you can see it, you can dream it, and you're on your way to be it. Lastly, we do have a mentorship program. I'm pleased to share that Edie Russell and I had the opportunity to connect as mentee and mentor this fall. Our mentorship program has reached over 820 participants in 15 different cohorts. We kick off a mentorship session every fall. So if you don't have a mentorship program within your organization, but you do want to support your employees to broaden their horizons, connect with professionals, and grow, the mentorship program could be that right support for you. And yeah, you stand by in the chat. We are sharing those links. And this is an opportunity to see someone grow from forester in training to RPF. A couple of book recommendations that I have. Again, you'll get the slides for these, but Drive by Dan Pink really covers that aspect of intrinsic motivation at work. Give and Take by Adam Grant is really that concept of being a giver and contributing to enablement. And The Tipping Point dives into this concept of being a connector. So just a couple of great references that touch on aspects of organizational psychology. As we close out, I'd like you to think about what will you take with you from this session? Are you considering making a change after, reflecting on some of these points? Or do you need a little more time for that to sink in? If you do, next week we'll be sending out the recording, a copy of this presentation, and a one-page template that you can apply in your organization. So I invite you to think about, what are you going to take with you? And feel free to add that in the chat. I think this is a good opportunity now in the last 10 minutes to take any questions if you have them. And I thank you for your attention in this session. I do see a question from Emmanuel, who is a new Canadian with qualifications in a country outside of Canada and above 30 years of age. Is there a pathway for us job leaders in forestry? I do thank Mira for her answer. I think another pathway for folks getting familiar with the work landscape in Canada is to explore the different professional organizations that are out there. PLT Canada, we have a mentorship program for youth, but there may be other organizations. I know the Ontario Urban Forest Council. I know the Urban Forestry domain really well, but there are a couple of organizations that if you become a member, there are mentorship opportunities and coaching. So that may be one aspect that you'd like to explore as you build your network in Canada. Thank you for your question. Yes, we will be sending the recording out to folks probably a week after this presentation. So thank you for your question. Yeah, and thank you, Tisha, for sharing the importance of the one-on-one. And often, supervisors wear multiple hats. I've been there, and different priorities pull us in different different directions. Carving out that time, maybe even if it's less frequent and not every week, does pay dividends. So really great to see you set that intention, and I wish you all the best as you put it into motion. And if other folks are thinking of making a change or implementing something in their organization, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. You can also expect a survey. I know that folks may have a bit of survey fatigue, but if you could fill out what you get from us, this will help guide and direct our future programming and make sure that our employer training is adapted to the realities of you and the people that you guide and coach. Et s'il y a des francophones dans la salle où vous connaissez, nous allons offrir cette formation le 11 février en français. And if we don't have any questions, folks, feel free to file out or get back to your day. And again, I'm standing by if you have any last questions or final thoughts.